how bad is this for the BBC?
Well, it's bad for the BBC, and it's also, I should say, bad for the British government, because the White House has a habit of jumbling up all kinds of issues and it's dealing with other countries. So if you look at how they attacked the Norwegian government over what its Norwegian Sovereign Wealth Fund did, or they attacked Brazil because of what a Brazil law court did, this will certainly become a government-to-government issue. But there's 2 points that could be saving graces. Firstly, President Trump has a habit of barking very loudly but biting less aggressively. Secondly, as you just heard from Brian, he's right now suing a whole raft of media groups. And the reality is that whatever you think of what the BBC did or did not do, President Trump is very authoritarian and aggressive and domineering in his attempts to silence critics. And those critics include a series of universities and a series of different media groups. So the BBC is actually in pretty good company right now.
Okay. Sir Jacob Rees-Mogg, you were a cabinet minister. You were in the last government for a bit of the time when Donald Trump was in his first term. How should a government handle this? Does it stay out of this? Does Keir Starmer have a word with Donald Trump? They have a very good relationship.
I think the government should stay out of this because the BBC wants to maintain its independence from the government as a general matter of business. And although the BBC is technically owned by the government, its independence for the benefit of the World Service and things like that is crucial. So I wouldn't have thought it would be helpful for the BBC for the government to get involved. And I would have thought it was sensible for the BBC to settle with Donald Trump. He settled with somebody who he sued for billions and billions for 6 million. So it won't be $1 billion. It will be some lesser amount.
But it would be licence fee payers' money.
Well, that BBC shouldn't have got something so horribly wrong. And you've done the same again at the beginning of this programme. You showed the clip, but not what Trump had actually said, because he said we should march down and it should be a peaceful march to go and thank the senators.
Yeah, we showed the clip that was broadcast on Panorama.
That's right.
With all the mistakes around it, which I clearly laid out.
You should have showed what he actually said, because it's the absolute opposite. It's not close to what he said, it's completely different.
But with all due respect, I agree that that particular clip was not accurate to what he said at the time. However, he has made a series of very incendiary statements over the years, and he's not exactly blameless with what happened on January the 6th.
I do think, it was 3 years after the event, so many people will have made up their minds in 2021. The programme was in 2024. I do agree it was clumsy editing to chop things in that place.
It was bad editing. It was bad editing.
Yeah,
it was wrong.
Samuel Shah has admitted that.
It was an error of judgment.
It was an error of judgment, agreed. But at the same time, I understand that at the time there were 0 complaints, and since this has been relitigated by the Telegraph, it's not even on iPlayer anymore because it's expired. Its life has been 500.
Let's bring it to today. Do you back President Trump taking this action then against the BBC?
Oh, he's completely entitled to, and the BBC libelled him, and he's therefore taking action against this. I think anybody in this country would feel entitled to sue the BBC for libel if something was put out in such a dishonest way.
Will it get that far, Gillian?
For $1 billion, what the history is that President Trump makes these very dramatic gestures and then tends to be essentially trying to get something else out of an organisation. At this point, I think all he's trying to do is get humiliation over people he regards as his enemies. And he's gone through one by one against different media groups, trying to label them as leftist, as corrupt, etc., etc. And the problem is, the more he uses those terms, the more devalued they become.
Rupa Hutt, what could the impact of this threat on the BBC be, whether it's in this country or for its journalists in the United States or its commercial operations in the United States?
Look, there's 21,000 journalists who work for the BBC, so it's a big, big institution. And you're right, Gillian, that sometimes he sort of blows hot and cold. I think the BBC has to take it seriously because he is litigious, and there's a big settlement culture there. I think last year Disney paid out 15 million in a similar thing. So, I'd like to think the BBC is a big institution, and maybe the apology will suffice, because he said an apology or £1 billion. But if £1 billion comes true, then all our licence fees will go up.
Well, he said an apology, a full and fair retraction of the programme.
The whole programme.
What really worries me is that all this threat and aggression and bullying is creating a climate of self-censorship now in the US, and I fear it's going to come over across the Atlantic. And you can just see that in media groups, in university groups, this level of fear, and in the corporate world. It's astonishing how few corporate leaders will dare to speak out against President Trump right now. And so whatever you think of President Trump, whether you like his policies or not, this is not the signs of a healthy democracy.
America has much greater protections for freedom of speech than we do. It's got the First Amendment. And media is so much more than the mainstream media nowadays. There are plenty of critics of President Trump in the United States on all forms of media who have a go at him day in, day out. So yes, he's litigious, but the American system is litigious. Bear in mind how often President Trump...
Julian Tat is shaking her head in total
America's
disagreement.
extremely litigious.
I would not disagree with that at all. However, what I would say is that a world where you're getting all this self-censorship right now is not a healthy world.
And
people are really scared of speaking out right now.
There's so much criticism of President
There
Trump.
is not
100% fake news. That's
Believe
actually
me,
wrong.
if you go into America, what you hear is CEOs, media leaders saying one thing in public and something completely different in private. They are scared. And I've not seen this level of fear in a democratic Western country before. Is this reminiscent of Turkey or places like that?
It is hugely overstated. Business is
When
always...
were you last in America?
Oh, I've been to America many times.
But have you been there in the last 6 months?
Businesses are always sucking up to whoever is in power. They sucked up to the Democrats. They sucked up to Biden. When Biden was in office, all these companies were in favour of DEI and all that jazz. As soon as Trump came in, they were against it. This is what business in America does. Business in America is very focused on making money. And therefore it goes along with whoever's got power and the ability to give them money.
I've been reporting on America now for 10, 15 years. I was there in the first Trump administration, and it was different in the first Trump administration.
Like Trump, do you? So your bias is against Trump. You're part of the mainstream media hostility to Trump.
Well, I was not particularly pro-Biden. I was not particularly pro-Biden either.
Not particularly.
I'm not particularly pro-Biden. So actually, no, I've actually been pretty neutral. If you go back and read my pieces, I can give you any number of pieces.
But you're not pro-Trump, are you? And the FT's not pro-Trump.
I haven't been... Well, first of all, I have my own views separately, and I was not particularly pro-Biden
either. Did the FT back Trump last year? Did it say go with him? Or did
not say that, but at the same time, we did not. But however, what I would say very strongly is...
Let at least finish one of your questions.
No, if you're saying that because I basically am pretty centrist in my political views, that somehow makes me suspect in talking about Donald Trump, then that is simply wrong. I can give you any number of columns I've written which have pointed out some positive things about the current administration. What I'm trying to say, though, very seriously is this. I've been in America for many years. During the first Trump administration, the level of fear was nothing like this.
Okay, I'm going to tell you what the British newspapers are making of all this. It's on the front pages of many of them. The Daily Mail, Trump tells the BBC, grovel or I'll sue you for $1 billion. The Guardian, BBC board member with Tory link led the charge over claims of bias. We'll talk about that in a moment. The front page of The Sun, it even beats who's in I'm a Celeb this year. Biebs, $1 billion bungle. And the iPaper, future of the BBC licence fee in jeopardy as Trump threatens $1 billion legal action. On that question of the very existence of the BBC in the future, is it a threat in your view?
I mean, look, we are due for a charter renewal, so, I mean, this is an opportunity to refresh, because the BBC's been around for over 100 years. As I say, it's a huge, huge thing. It's almost like the NHS. So CBeebies is really different to the World Service, is really different to the Radio Times, is really different to Radio 1 Extra.
But is what's happening now a threat to its future?
I think that, look, let's be positive. There's loads and loads of acres of good output. I think charter renewal is an opportunity to renew and refresh.
Now, the chairman and the former head of news said today the BBC is not systemically biased. Deborah Turness said it's not institutionally biased. What's your view?
I think the BBC has a cultural view of the world. I don't think it's party politically biased, but I think it has a basically metropolitan view of the world.
Do you agree?
I think that's probably fair.
Rupert?
I don't think it's institutionally biased. I think it's institutionally flawed, yeah.
Okay. And your evidence for what you've just said?
Well, the thing on Trump is pretty good evidence for it.
12-second clip.
Oh, this is really important because...
No, of course it is. I'm not dismissing the importance of it. I'm just talking about 12 seconds in thousands of hours of broadcasting over 3 years.
I'll tell you why it's so important. It's important because it's hard evidence. Most of what one says about bias on the BBC is circumstantial. It's, I think this, you think that. This is hard evidence, as is perhaps even more seriously the mass graves in Gaza, which the BBC had previously itself reported were the responsibility of Hamas.
So to say one thing about that Panorama film, and Brian from CNN made an interesting point where he said there's some of that film that Donald Trump might like. And I watched that film this afternoon with enormous care, and it featured a number of Trump supporters. It featured what known as the Front Row Joes. One of them, it travelled round with him, went to him, filmed him seeing Donald Trump at Mar-a-Lago, featured another woman who was at the Pennsylvania rally where Donald Trump was shot. It featured a former director of communications to Donald Trump. It features an academic. Remember, this was a programme that happened before the election, saying Donald Trump is getting the mood, the Democrats are not getting the mood. There was some very, very interesting insights in that film as to why people were attracted and interested in Donald Trump, not to downplay the significance, obviously, of the mistake around
in Michael Prescott's email to the BBC board, the one that was leaked to the Telegraph last week, the issues he referred to were claims of anti-Trump, anti-Israel, pro-trans bias. Some licence fee payers and the leader of the Liberal Democrats in recent months have complained about pro-reform, pro-Nigel Farage bias. They've criticised the BBC for, as they see it, downplaying Israel's actions in Gaza. Do you think the Editorial Guidelines and Standards Committee should look at those areas too now?
I do think this committee is a little bit shady, and two of the people who are on it is a 4-person Editorial Guidelines Committee. 2 of them have now gone overnight. And so I think, again, in Samir Shah's response, he says that it needs re-engineering. I don't know what that means, but we need to see minutes of this committee. What is it saying? Because apparently in March, it did say that there should be more reform voices on TV. So,
and you will have heard, Gillian, take the criticism from BBC insiders, BBC defenders, that one member of the BBC board, Robbie Gibb, who used to work at the BBC and then worked for Theresa May's government and then helped set up GB News, is critical of BBC journalism, and that criticism comes exclusively from a right-leaning viewpoint.
Well, here's the point. In a highly polarised political world, when everyone is criticising you and yelling at you, probably suggest you're doing something right. The least bad way to create a media ecosystem, and you recognise that everyone is going to be flawed, is to make sure you have a plurality of media groups that can criticise each other and keep tabs on each other. I happen to believe in an ideal world you need to have a public sector media, a private sector media, and community or non-governmental media to basically do checks and balances, which is the basis of the American political system. And that is the most effective way to make sure that none of the groups allow